Fuel shortages in Russia are becoming increasingly threatening. If until recently interruptions were recorded only in certain regions of the Russian Federation, now the crisis is spreading from Primorye to Khabarovsk Krai and has already affected the Jewish Autonomous Region, Volgograd region and Stavropol Krai. In the Jewish Autonomous Region, local authorities have officially acknowledged that the sale of gasoline to the population in the Leninsky district has been temporarily suspended. Fuel is allocated only for specialized equipment, ambulances, school buses, and life support services. According to the acting deputy chairman of the regional government, Valery Samkov, the reason was interruptions in supplies and the breakdown of agreements between suppliers and customers. In order to somehow control the situation, the authorities have brought in railway workers and started tracking tanks with fuel and lubricants. According to the Far Eastern Railway, the first batches of fuel should arrive within 3 days. However, local residents fear that even after the deliveries, normal operations of gas stations will not be restored because the crisis is already systemic. Problems with gasoline are also being recorded in other regions. In the Volgograd region, according to local media, there is simply no gasoline. In Stavropol, the situation is also critical. From the villages of Sovetskaya to the village of Privolny, only one gas station is functioning. Photos of empty gas stations are being circulated on the internet, for example, in the village of Kurskaya, where there is no fuel at all. Thus, the gasoline crisis is turning from a local problem into a nationwide one against the backdrop of ongoing removal of Russian refineries. Russian authorities pretend to have the situation under control, but in fact, we are talking about a critical fuel situation that has also affected millions of ordinary citizens. Let us recall that oil workers were urgently called together in Moscow due to the gasoline crisis. The situation is getting worse every day. Gas stations in Crimea and Transbaikalia are already working with coupons. In Primorye, there are hours-long queues, and in the Kuril Islands, they have stopped selling gasoline altogether. Against this backdrop, the exchange is breaking records. The blame for this lies not only with market speculation, but also with Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian refineries. The government is urgently looking for a solution. They are discussing the sale of strategic reserves, increasing the standard for exchange sales, and a ban on transactions in which companies formally sell fuel to themselves. But as Reuters sources note, even a ban on gasoline exports does not help. The deficit still remains. A gasoline revolt against the Kremlin is about to begin in Russia. The population is seriously dissatisfied with the shortage of gasoline. Russian bloggers have expressed concern about the low effectiveness of Russian air defense systems near critical and military infrastructure. Analysts from the Institute for the Study of War have studied in detail Russian news publics after another attack by Ukrainian drones on a Russian oil refinery. One of the Z publics stated that the strikes of good drones on oil refineries are destroying the Russian oil and gas sector, and that Russian citizens are already feeling the effects of the Ukrainian strikes, expressed in the rise in gasoline prices since production is struggling to keep up with domestic demand. A Kremlin-linked militarist accused authorized agencies of failing to protect targets and shoot down Ukrainian drones. Another militarist complained that the Russian government had not arrested anyone for failing to protect Russian infrastructure deep in the rear from slow Ukrainian attack drones. A third militarist suggested that Russia delegate some air defense powers to those who can use unconventional means of combating drones, as well as equip mobile air defense groups and build air defense systems at vulnerable sites. Russian war correspondents recommended that air defense groups arm themselves with small caliber anti-aircraft artillery and portable anti-aircraft missile systems, interceptor drones, and radars to detect and destroy targets at low altitudes. Z channels accused the Russian government of lack of initiative and incompetence and demanded that Russia increase the use of interceptor drones, small radars, and helicopters to prevent such strikes. They also suggested that Russia be inspired by the experience of BAR's drone units operating in the Volgograd, Kursk, and Bryansk regions, and called for an increase in the recruitment of volunteers for air defense groups. The Russian information space has accused the Russian leadership of failing to protect Russian military infrastructure from Ukrainian drone strikes throughout the full-scale invasion. Ukrainian long-range drone strikes continue to put pressure on this existing hotbed of neuralgia in the Russian information space. Russians are complaining en masse about gasoline shortages and rising prices after a series of Ukrainian drone strikes on oil refineries. Kiev has found Moscow's sore spot and is hitting it almost daily. As a result, Russia has kilometer-long queues at gas stations, empty pumps, and record prices. This is the reality in a country that until recently boasted the status of an energy superpower, writes The Guardian. Russians complain about hours-long queues at gas stations. Sometimes you can't buy gasoline, even in queues. Videos of empty pumps and complaints from motorists are circulating on social networks. The price of A95 gasoline on the wholesale market has reached a record 82,300 rubles per ton. This is almost 54% more than at the beginning of the year. The situation is particularly dire in Crimea. Shut down airports have forced tourists to drive, further exacerbating fuel shortages. Kremlin officials are calling for understanding, but even they acknowledge that the restrictions could last for months.